Welcome to the Trojans module. This is a very, very important module. It is certainly absolutely relevant today. Most of what we've done in the beginning part of the penetration testing lifecycle has been focused on disclosure, what has been disclosed to us and how to use that to our advantage. In the last module, system hacking, we started to focus on integrity, okay? Well, we can still use some parts of disclosure and confidentiality to our advantage, but this is very much changing the integrity of our systems. So this is absolutely the hack here, okay? This is just one of the major areas or techniques. So let's start with Trojans. Trojans have two components to them, an overt component and a covert component, okay? The overt is basically what's in the user's face. What do they see? What's the distracting mechanism? Okay, and commonly this comes in the formats of like freeware, software, games, or generally we would classify that as distractor software. Then the covert component is, well, what's the destructive piece? What is the penetration tester or hacker trying to do? And this is where backdoors, rootkits, keyloggers, or any sort of malicious spyware or software comes in play. So the concept of Trojans really comes from the story of Troy. Overtly or on the outside, it just looks like a horse. Right? It looks like something fun, something entertainment for the user, something that's going to get them to click on me and execute me. Meanwhile, while that's in their face, something covertly or behind the scenes is happening in the background. And this is where, like I said, we do our rootkits and our backdoors and keyloggers and things like that. Before we move on, let's talk about the different types of Trojans. Now this is specific to realistically what are you trying to accomplish, and there's many different types. So let's just run through this one time. There's VNC Trojans or web-based Trojans or HTTP Trojans, chat, IRC or ICQ chat Trojans, command shell like bash or the command prompt, destructive style Trojans, Trojans that infect documents or files and folders, or botnets for the purpose of distributed denial of service, or proxy Trojans, or remote access Trojans, or email Trojans, or you can go to a specific port or protocol like FTP, or something that specifically damages the graphical user interface of something, or spam, or defacement, or even nowadays mobile. Okay, so that's just a quick area here. Now, you don't have to be an expert in every single one of these techniques, although to make yourself a well-rounded penetration tester, knowing how to do each of these types hands-on is frankly invaluable in my opinion. Next, let's go through the infection techniques, right? How do we actually get the user to click on our stuff? Well, here are the most common mechanisms. We can use instant messaging or IRC or ICQ style traffic. You can physically install it on the computer, or maybe through like a web browser as a script or a JavaScript or a download or an ActiveX component or something to that nature. Or maybe use some sort of fake program, or maybe as an attachment through email, or advertised as some sort of freeware or bundled utility or some sort of game, right? So then we can go into the different evading techniques. Well, this is kind of where you have to think both offensively and defensively. If you understand how system administrators or network administrators try to defend against Trojans, and we're going to cover that lastly in terms of countermeasures and detection. But if you understand that, well, then you can understand how to get your Trojan in without being detected. So this is where knowing how intrusion detection system works, learning how antivirus programs work, because if you know what your target or your destination and how they're trying to detect the stuff, if you know how that works, well, then you can sidestep that and try to get another path in, so without setting off the alarms, if you will. Also, common indicators. of a Trojan. This is where you absolutely have to understand the hands-on mechanisms of a Trojan horse construction kit. You want to know what the symptoms are? Well, you can either spend your time defensively looking through your antivirus sites and reading up on everything, or you can just use your construction kits, and there's several of them nowadays to create this. You can use the construction kits, and it's basically click, 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 and that basically is what gets replicated on the end system. Also know the types as well. Also, Trojans, since we're over a network, they typically use common ports. Like, for example, port 12345 or port 666, or literally you could Google, common Trojan ports. You could come up with a list of hundreds of these. Okay. Generally, if the Trojan port has some sort of numerical significance, like a 666 or a 12345, that's generally an indicator of a Trojan. Not limited to that, because you can Trojan port 80 if you want to, or port 25, but like I say, the common one, port 12345, or some sort of significance in a number pattern. Penetration testers are lazy, just like everybody else, right? So if I was creating one and I had to choose a port, and I could choose port 12345 on the keyboard, or 666, or 54321, or go around your numerical keypad, 12398746456 or something like that, right? So some sort of common numerical pattern. Also, you need to know hands-on how to create a wrapper. Now, there's kind of a little trick to wrapping software, because wrapping software like Advanced File Joiner or Elite Wrap, they take our overt and covert application and they bind them together into new .exe, if you will. But the trick to this is the user going to click on it or not? Now, this is not exactly politically correct, or let's just say, we'll just leave it as politically correct. You have to hit the temptations or the subconscious of the person clicking the stuff. So a great way to approach this is go to the news, pick out the most hot topic of the day, and then create your Trojan horse based off of that hit button. Like, for example, go to the news and find a major story, and then say, major news story, photos of this. Okay? And then when you replicate that Trojan out there, somebody's going to say, well, I want to see the photos, or I want to see the video, or I want to hear the audio. But you have to name that file something that is going to lure the user to actually click on this. Now, this is all mindset here. So from a penetration testing point of view, you have to hit the hot buttons or the political buttons. Or most of these things are either sexist or racist or some sort of hot button. Now, I'm not advocating that we be, outside of a professional here, but again, does the end user click on it or not? The difference is, do you get infected or not? Or does your exploit work or not? So you have to hit these hot buttons. And so a lot of the Trojans that are replicated out through the world, they focus on some sort of hot button factor so that the end user goes, okay, yes, I want to see that. I can't resist. The name of this file is so tempting, I must see it. I must click on it. Okay? So important to realize that. But the wrappers themselves also have executable indicators, okay? Like Elite Wrap, very, very popular wrapping program. But if you actually take apart the executable, in the header of the executable, most antivirus software will just say that, hey, this executable was created with Elite Wrap or Advanced File Joiner, and so they'll use that as the signature for detection. So that nullifies everything made with that program. So not only do you have to create the Trojan, but you have to be able to modify the header in a way that is going to avoid detection. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we get into this. Detection techniques. Okay? So detection techniques. Ports. Well, we already said that there's common Trojan ports, so this is where you can either choose your own or Google the most common ones, and then monitor for example, port 12345. Also, in terms of a system that it's been infected with a Trojan, what is the running processes? Are they legitimate? Are they authorized? Or are they not? If you can detect that, well, then you could detect maybe a malicious application and therefore defeat the penetration tester at work. Also, scanning through the registry and look for common registry settings or indicators. Also, certain device drivers or display drivers or USB drivers, they've been known to have common infection techniques. So if you can monitor for authorized versus unauthorized drivers, that could lead to you being detected or not. Also, what services are running, right? If I'm going to infect a system, I'm not going to call the Trojan running a service, Trojan.svc. That wouldn't make any sense because that's easily detectable. So I would create a service, something like SVC host, something that the network administrator is going to go, yep, that looks normal to me, okay? Also, startup locations. This is where programs like msconfig, if we go into the startup section of msconfig, can we see that the Trojan is called upon there? Or maybe in the registry under run versus run once. Okay. Also, Trojans that focus on files and folders. If we know what those indicators look like, well, then we can detect them. Or strange or signature-based or even anomaly-based or integrity-based network activity. If you have a baseline and you can compare against that, well, that could lead to a detection. And of course, lastly, common scanners. And I would bundle this into our antivirus or anti-Trojan style software. So, two sides of the story here. What the penetration tester is trying to accomplish in whatever way he or she is trying to do that, versus defensively what's already in place, or how is the client or organization going to react, okay? So this is where what countermeasures are in place, okay? Simply stated, email attachments. If I can just email you the Trojan and I can get a group of users to click on it, well, easy for me, the penetration tester, and bad for you, the organization. So certain email attachments have been known to be blocked, like VBS for a very common example. Also, it's real easy in the high security world to just shut off instant messaging altogether, because when's the last time you connected to your instant messaging client, either authenticated or could transfer a file and monitor that instant messaging session? So it's really easy to shut off instant messaging. Also, standard technical implementation guidelines. Is the organization or client using them appropriately? Right? If they are, well, that makes the job of the penetration tester that much harder. Also, is the organization monitoring traffic? Can I just dance through the organization and send whatever I want through the organization and they have no idea that it's even happening for years at a time in the best case scenario? Or as soon as I insert the code onto the network, I'm detected and finished. Also, is the client hardening their systems, which means reducing the surface area of attack? Blocking the common ports. Can you just send to any port, or is it restricted? This is where good access control list monitoring, authoring, revisions, and reviewing come into play. What's the client's patch management process? If they have a very poor patch management process, then that gives me a larger window of opportunity to actually get my Trojan infected in the organization. Also, monitoring for integrity, either at the system level, like hashing every file in the system, or using some sort of network-based integrity monitoring software, like a Tripwire, for example, or good HIDs and NIDs, or HIPs and NIPs, meaning intrusion detection and intrusion prevention, both network and host. Also, using trusted sources of software. All right? You should be able to allow users to go out to the internet and install any software they want. So most of the time, operating systems are hardened and they won't allow the user to install the application, for example, in program files. But what users have learned to do is, okay, well, since I have full control over my documents, I'll just install the application into my documents, and then that leads to the infection. Or anti-Trojan software, and I would summarize this as your classic antivirus. And you could do a quick Google search and find, all of the major antivirus vendors out there. So let's go ahead and summarize before we get into the hands-on component. The Trojan pieces, they all have an overt and covert component. We use wrapping software to create an infectious application that could be of various types, all the way from VNC all the way down to mobile phones. Know the evading techniques. If you know how to evade getting caught, well, then you increase the likelihood of your infection taking place. Again, big picture stuff here. Does the Trojan work or not? Again, we have to hit that hot button. If you don't hit the hot button, the person's not going to be inclined to click on the executable. So you got to pay very, very close attention to that. And especially in a day and age where everybody's getting real sensitive about giving out their email because they're tired of spam, they're tired of the advertisements and things like that. So people hold on to their email address a lot closer, today than they did 10 and 15 years ago. Know the indicators, know the common ports, know the infection techniques. Also, pay very close attention to all the ways in which you can detect a Trojan, because that tells us the landscape of how to navigate around it so that ultimately we can get our Trojan infected on our target. And then, of course, summarizing with the countermeasures. If you know the countermeasures that are in play, well, then you can bypass them and actually get your Trojans to work. But the big picture here is the Trojan going to work or not? Now, this is both an art and a science. Technically speaking, we got to know all of the little ins and outs and configurations and everything else. But this is very much an art, right? Is your Trojan going to work or is it not going to work? This is where your expertise as the penetration tester comes into play. So let's go ahead and get started and look at some hands-on examples.